Chapter 6. Breaking Points. The winter morning brought a rare chill to Sydney, matching the atmosphere in Lakemba High's Assembly Hall. Year 12 students gathered for what should have been a routine cultural awareness presentation. But for Ibrahiim, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. The school's annual Harmony Day celebration had always been a point of pride, a showcase of Lakemba's diverse community. Students' families would share their migration stories, traditional foods, and cultural performances. This year, however, the tensions in the Middle East had cast a shadow over the usually festive event. Michael sat 2 rows ahead, his shoulders tense. They hadn't properly spoken in weeks, not since Ibrahiim had started avoiding their regular cricket matches and family dinners. The distance between them felt like a physical presence. Ms. Thompson, the principal, stood at the podium. Today's assembly is about understanding different perspectives, she began, her voice carrying across the silent hall. We've invited students to share their family stories of migration and identity. Ibrahiim's hand clutched the Star of David pendant in his pocket. He'd started carrying it everywhere, a tangible reminder of the truth he'd been struggling to accept. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Some truths need to be spoken to be understood. Rachel Goldman was the first speaker. She talked about her grandparents' survival during the Holocaust, their journey to Australia, and the importance of preserving cultural memory. As she spoke, Ibrahiim felt the weight of his own unspoken history pressing against his chest. Then Ahmed took the stage, speaking passionately about his Palestinian heritage, his family's displacement, their hopes for peace. In the audience, Michael nodded along, while Ibrahiim's stomach twisted into knots. Would anyone else like to share their story? Ms. Thompson asked, looking around the hall. The silence stretched for a moment. Then, before he could second-guess himself, Ibrahiim stood up. Walking to the podium felt like crossing an ocean. His heart thundered in his chest as he faced his schoolmates, faces he'd known for years, friends who thought they knew him. My name is Ibrahiim Samir, he began, his voice shaky but gaining strength. And until recently, I thought I knew exactly who I was. The pendant felt warm in his hand as he pulled it out. 3 months ago, on my birthday, my grandmother showed me this. It belonged to my grandfather, who wasn't born Ahmed Samir, but Abraham Steinberg, a Jewish boy from Warsaw. The assembly hall fell completely silent. In the audience, Michael's face showed confusion turning to shock. Ahmed straightened in his seat, his expression unreadable. My grandfather's family fled the Holocaust, finding refuge in Palestine. They were protected by Muslim families and eventually chose to convert to Islam, changing their name and identity to survive. Ibrahiim's voice cracked slightly. They became Palestinian, not just by choice, but by love for the land and people who saved them. He could see Rachel nodding slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. But Michael had gone pale, his worldview visibly shaking. I am Palestinian, Ibrahiim continued. That's not a lie, but I'm also Jewish by heritage. I carry both stories in my blood, and here in Australia, I'm learning that identity isn't about choosing sides. It's about understanding all parts of who you are. The silence that followed his words felt electric. Ms. Thompson moved towards the podium. But before she could reach it, Michael stood up and walked out of the hall. The heavy door slammed behind him, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. Ahmed remained seated, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. Rachel's hand had risen to touch her own Star of David necklace, worn openly around her neck. Thank you, Ibrahiim, Ms. Thompson said softly. This is exactly what today is about, the courage to share our complex stories. But Ibrahiim barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on the door through which his best mate had disappeared. Years of friendship, cricket games, shared meals, and late-night conversations seemed to hang in the balance. During lunch break, the school buzzed with whispered conversations. Some students approached Ibrahiim with questions, while others kept their distance. Rachel found him sitting alone under the eucalyptus tree where he and Michael usually ate. "That was brave," she said, settling beside him. "It's not easy being the keeper of complicated truths. I might have just lost my best mate," Ibrahiim replied, watching Michael across the schoolyard, surrounded by a group of their Lebanese-Australian friends who were gesturing animatedly. "Give him time," Rachel advised. "Some truths take a while to settle." The afternoon classes passed in a blur. In modern history, their usual seats next to each other remained separated by an empty chair. Michael's absence felt like a physical ache. As the final bell rang, Ibrahiim found a message on his phone from his grandmother. "Your grandfather would be proud." Truth, like rain, finds its way through any crack. Walking home alone through Lakemba's streets, past the shops with signs in Arabic and English, past the mosque where he'd prayed alongside Michael's family, past the cricket field where they'd spent countless afternoons, Ibrahiim felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having spoken his truth, heavier for the cost of that honesty.